Beautiful. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the How We Heal series. This panel series is brought to you by members of the Inner Arts Collective here in Toronto, Canada. The How We Heal series is really about sparking conversation about different topics in wellness, things that are emerging that we're all noticing in our fields of practice. And our goal is really to offer insights and tools and strategies to help all of us thrive. My name is Melanie Ollenberg, so I'll be your moderator today. And I'm joined by Michele Meehan, Nicholas Veit, and Sumeet Saini. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the land that we're each on. Here in Toronto, we acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it's now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis people. So I invite each of you, you can type in the comment box if there's some folks that are part of the ancestral heritage of the land that you're on, or the ancestral line that's in your bloodline that you'd like to honor. Please type that in the chat box so that we know the peoples that you'd like to honor and respect. And just take a moment to be present with that gratitude. The work that we're doing here today really builds on the past, and it also creates a better future for generations to come. So we'll just take a look here at, we have Jerry from Brampton, Amanda from Idaho. If there's anything that you'd like to add about the traditional peoples of your territory, of your land, do feel free to share. And welcome to our new guests that have just joined in as well. Okay, so as those come in, you can notice them in our chat box as they come in. I'd like to start by just inviting our members here to introduce themselves and what brings them to this topic. So to give you a little bit of background about how the members come into these topics, we discussed as a planning team what kinds of themes and like an arc across the year that we wanted to focus on. And this month's theme is really about conscious relationship. So we started our month with a panel on cultivating presence, knowing that conscious relationship really begins with the self. And today, since we're just after Family Day here in Canada, Valentine's Day, we also wanted to focus on the theme of isolation and loneliness. This is a really prominent topic and theme that are coming up across the board for many wellness practitioners, and in many of us individually, in our families, our friends. We're dealing with some really unique situations here with COVID and lockdowns and social distancing, and isolation and loneliness is very prevalent, and it's a very challenging energy to move through. It's a challenging experience to move through. And our members are noticing that in their practice and have some really fantastic tools and strategies to share with you. So Michele, would you mind starting by introducing yourself and what brings you to the topic of isolation and loneliness, your unique perspective on it? Oh, one sec, you're muted.
Thank you, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a psychotherapist and shamanic practitioner. And so, I approach the idea of loneliness or isolation, both from like the personal subjective viewpoint. So often with clients, I'm helping them look at, what their early life experiences were, what kinds of core beliefs they developed about, connection, aloneness, independence, dependence, interdependence, and look at whether there's some strategies that help create a better experience of connectedness at whatever is the right level, because we're all a bit different in terms of, some of us introverts really like alone time. For extroverts, it's really hard. And of course, through this past year, where we've been dealing with social distancing and isolation, and we've had to get creative. It's, I think, really turned things upside down for a lot of people. We've had to get creative with staying connected. And even with, thankfully, technology that allows us to stay connected, it's not the same as being in the room with another person, or, having a hug, or, being able to do those things that we all enjoyed not so long ago. So, I really help people process what's going on for them, how that feels, mentally, emotionally, physically. From a shamanic perspective, it's kind of an interesting thing, because and I think this will come up later on, there's a spiritual truth that everything in life is interconnected. And it's been a myth of modern culture that we were ever isolated or separate. And so, the shamanic worldview really gives us some tools and strategies for coming into relationship with, like, the whole web of life. And when we start to really understand that we are part of everything, it's much harder to feel lonely or isolated. So I'll leave the rest for later. We've got more to cover through the morning.
Thank you so much. Sumeet, would you mind introducing yourself and what brings you to the conversation, and a little bit about your background as a practitioner?
Yeah, well, a powerful intro by Michelle. Thanks for that. So thank you everyone for joining us for this very important topic. I'm a writer, comedian, and psychotherapist from Toronto, Canada. And so what brings me to this topic is that I believe that our busy and fast-paced modern culture leaves little time and space for self-exploration and spiritual growth. Um, so and they approach this through the lens of spirituality and creativity, because what this pandemic lockdown has kind of forced us to finally deal with is being alone with ourselves. And this is something that people have not been able to develop, because our culture is has a just influx of all kinds of distractions and addictions and social media, Netflix, whatever you name it, where and this is not something that humans had to deal with for most of their of history, right? We didn't have, we weren't had this flood of things to distract ourselves with all the time. And so another part of my approach is history, is to remind ourselves of, hey, we've been through this before. How did we get through it? So, and a big part of that is spirituality. People, for example, they had a relationship to something outside of themselves. And for me, that's where spirituality and creativity comes in, right? Because spirituality is a relationship to, that could be to God, to nature, to love, whatever, that looks for you. And then also creativity, because that's also a relationship to something outside of yourself. And for me, that's comedy, right? So when I'm deprived of company, that's something I have a relationship with that kind of helps me keeps me fulfilled and with a sense of purpose and joy. Um, and yeah, and when we're deprived of these things that are like quick fixes, these addictions and distractions, what we find is that then we have no choice but then to resort to the things that used to give us, that fulfillment and connection, like other people, hobbies, nature, right? And that's what it was for me, right? Because when people, big belief for me is that boredom is the engine of creativity, right? So when you're bored, you have nothing to do, then you can finally allow your mind to wander to things where it might not, it would not usually go to if you didn't give it the opportunity to just be free to explore, right? So daydream, imagination, and what we're seeing now is a lack of imagination, right? Because there's so many images everywhere that we're constantly surrounded by that we haven't built that muscle of imagination. Yeah, so just So those are the two approaches that I have of finding connection, you know, through yourself, but also something transcendent.
Sorry, I had to admit a couple people as well. Welcome to our new arrivals. Thank you very much, Sumeet, for your introduction. So next I'd like to invite Nicholas. He wanted to share a meditation to just help us get centered and present with this topic. Nicholas, would you mind getting started?
Okay, so hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Nick Veit. I'm a past life regression therapist, and I help connect people to parts of themselves that have something to teach them. This always involves an integration and alignment of the emotional experience. And as far as isolation and loneliness are concerned, I found that in my practice, physical distance often isn't the decisive factor in whether a person feels lonely or not. People sometimes long for connection when they have people physically present with them. All that being said, physical touch is human and extremely important, and people are being deprived of that right now. So I want to stress the importance of having an awareness and acknowledgement of one's own body, as that's a crucial factor in feeling connected. So yeah, before turning to questions, I would like to guide everyone through a meditative process to help still any stagnant thoughts or emotions and center everybody, so that we can approach the topic, which is a difficult one, from a place of peaceful engagement. So I'm just going to mute my video because I'm worried about interfering. Okay. So if you'd like to just close your eyes right now. Just take a nice deep breath and become aware of your own self. Imagine connecting with the earth through beautiful tree roots. Seeing these tree roots in the ground, in the soil of the earth, still and centered. Feel yourself centered in this way, still, connected, and peaceful. Just take another deep breath, letting go of all thoughts, worries, and emotions occupying you up until this moment. Memories of the past and concerns for the present and future. And see a nice, gentle, temperate landscape as you exhale, showing itself to you as you exhale and as you allow it to meet you. There are trees around, and the air is a peaceful temperature with a fresh, familiar smell that invigorates you and invites you to take in your surroundings. Nearby is a beautiful lake with a peculiar deep blue color, reflecting the beautiful sunlit sky. And you notice that across this big watery body stands a tall and majestic mountain. Isn't it interesting that seeing the mountain off in the distance with its pointy summit brings a rush of feeling to your lungs, as if you had a pair of outstretched arms toward the sky, a little bit like the feeling of reaching out to hug someone dear to you. Perhaps someone you haven't seen in quite a while, and you feel completely present in the joy of being in their company. Allow yourself to move into this feeling, knowing that it is a joyous experience. And feel the sense of peace and relaxation building in the tops of your lungs, in the top of the mountain. Just take a few moments to resound in the feeling as it blankets and surrounds your heart. See that white snow-capped mountaintop, and just take your arms and cross them over your shoulders, feeling your shoulders and acknowledging yourself, acknowledging your body. Tell yourself that you are okay. Tell yourself that you care about yourself and that you love yourself. You're forgiven for anything you've blamed on yourself, because right now, everything is okay. Now I want you to become aware of your abdomen. And if you feel some fear, uneasiness, or discomfort there, just become aware of the sensation of satiety, of being well fed. You can gently rub your abdomen and communicate with your body the desire to feel satiety, as if you just had a wonderful meal with wonderful people all around you. That warm, happy, and euphoric feeling of being well nourished. If you don't feel this right now, that's okay, because you're communicating to your body that you desire this for yourself. And your body is an intelligent being that will help you take action to get to that feeling. Now, become aware of the base of your spine. You can place your hands on your knees or thighs and gently massage yourself, telling yourself and your body that you are safe and secure. It is healthy to feel safe. It is healthy to desire to feel safe. So, even if just for now, just ignore whatever might be running through your mind to the contrary, or any emotions that seem to the contrary, and speak directly to your body through your touch, through your intention, and tell yourself that right now you will feel safe. Once again, feel your feet as if they were roots in the ground, and feel yourself connected to the earth. Thank her for you being safe, satiated, and peaceful. Now, you can open your eyes and gently massage any areas of your body that you feel called to. And if you have any water nearby, please take a drink. Okay.
Thank you, Nick.
Mhm.
Oh, got it. What a beautiful meditation and a lovely way to start our discussion today. Thank you. So to get started, just switch gears a little bit, but hold on to that feeling. Hold on to that feeling, everybody. When we talk about isolation and loneliness, I'd just like to get clear on what we're talking about so that we're on the same page with definitions. And if we're not on the same page with definitions, just to give you each a chance to really define and clarify, describe what we're talking about when we talk about isolation and loneliness. How would you guys say that isolation and loneliness differ from each other? How would you describe them?
Okay, I think maybe it'd be helpful just to start with some definitions. So for isolation, it means far from others, difficult to get to, remote, characterized by little social contact, separated from other persons or things, alone, solitary. So for me, isolation is something that is physical, whereby you are deprived of the company of others, whether through circumstances or choice. Loneliness, on the other hand, it means it's causing a depressing feeling of being alone, without the sympathetic or friendly companionship, support, etc. of others. And so, taking that into consideration, so while loneliness also has a meaning of being physically alone as well. It also has the emotional undertone and nuance, of that is best captured by the phrase, "You can be alone, but not lonely," right? So, for example, you're you're in a room full of other people, but you don't really know how to connect with them, and or you're in a relationship and you're talking to someone, but they're kind of texting. It's almost as if that person's not even there. So it's almost like they kind of emotionally abandon you. You're trying to reach out to them. Hey, I want to connect with you about something. I'm sharing something vulnerable, and it's like they might as well not be there. So you're not alone, but you're lonely, right? So physically, someone is there, right? So not isolated, but lonely because the emotional component's not there. And this is something that we're being forced to confront with the lockdown now, because people are seeing now that um, that while they are alone, they're also lonely, because there's that self-abandonment happening where they used to reach out to others for support and things like that. Now when they're uncomfortable, they not sure what to do with that, right? So that's where we can come in with these tools and ideas to show how a relationship to self can be developed, so you don't neglect and abandon yourself.
So I guess I'll jump in here. Loneliness I see as more or less a conscious longing. If we're really distracted by our lives, we might not notice it as much. But in times like these, where things sometimes take a pause, it becomes more obvious, which can be hard when it seems like there's little you can do about it. And isolation, I simply see as, well, from this perspective, is just a more severe and more chronic. I'll just keep it at that.
And I'll just, add some thoughts that, as I was reflecting on these words, both loneliness and isolation felt to me like they have a negative connotation. And I would contrast them with being in solitude, which feels more, and solitude feels like a choice, whereas loneliness and isolation to me have a bit of a connotation of being not chosen, maybe imposed by external circumstances. And of course, we're all dealing with social isolation during the pandemic, which certainly has an externally imposed element to it. But sometimes it's also, people can feel isolated in a peer group because they hold a different viewpoint, and then they get judged and they become isolated by that judgment. Again, feels a bit external to me. And, as Nick and Sumeet have both said, we can feel lonely in a crowd or in a relationship, or we can feel connected when we're alone. So that's, it's not so much about the, so I question, what is it that's missing if we're with people? And, I think we need authentic connection. And, I was reflecting on a client that I'm seeing where there's communication with her husband, regular, but it's missing that authenticity, and she doesn't feel heard, she doesn't feel seen, she doesn't feel validated, and she feels very lonely in this relationship. And I think those ingredients, feeling like we can be genuine, are critical. And as Sumeet said, it starts with ourselves. If we have an authentic connection with all the parts of ourselves, that is a wonderful buffer to feeling lonely or isolated. I think we do still need others, but if we don't have that authentic connection with ourselves, it puts us off balance and then dependent on others in a way that's really not so reliable or comfortable. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there.
It reminds me, when you were talking, Michelle, Carol also mentioned that she was thinking that loneliness was about being misunderstood and not heard. And I think that really touches on like an aspect of what you were just sharing. So you touched on solitude, and You know, I'd love to spend a little bit of time just differentiating between there's this healthy sense of solitude on the one hand, and how do we differentiate between that healthy sense of solitude and the unhealthy sense of isolation and loneliness? Like, when does it slide from being a good thing to like being maybe an SOS? Could you guys share some of the warning signs that we need to look out for, and how do we differentiate between this healthy versus unhealthy sense? Who would like to go first? Sumeet?
Yeah, I can go. So I think a big sign of unhealthy solitude, isolation is withdrawal. You know, I heard a couple of people talk about, you know, they had friends and then all of a sudden they disappear from the group chat, you know. And this can be the kind of person who's always there for others, listening, supportive, empathetic, but then when their time of need comes, they don't know what to do because they've always been the giver. You know, they struggle with how to receive. So that's a big sign that, you know, if you notice someone's gone kind of missing, uh, if they kind of keep things very short in the conversations, like if you're noticing changes in the behavior, that's a good sign. If they're avoiding certain topics, if, for example, say, hey, how are you? It's like, yeah, I'm great. How about you? And like trying to change the topic, always make it about like you, you know, divert the attention from themselves. Um, Another thing that I'm noticing in my practice is that, you know, limiting beliefs would be another one. So, you know, people saying things like, I can't do it. I'm scared of being alone. I don't know how. And when they're like if they're trying to keep themselves busy, well, so technically they're alone, no one's around them, you know, and they're trying to constantly find things to do, but then there's a loneliness there because what about the self? Are you taking care of the self? Because, you know, distracting yourself with movies and video games and stuff like that, you know, it helps to a certain extent, but then, you know, it's a band-aid, right? So for example, there's one person who's telling me, you know, while not watching a certain amount of Netflix, she gets to this point of starts to feel upset about something, you know, and she doesn't actually do anything about it. I think she just watches more Netflix or something. But then, so then there's that abandonment of and neglect of, hey, there's something your body's saying, hey, look at me, I'm upset, and you're kind of just pushing that, you know, away because it's uncomfortable. So those are signs, you know, busyness, distractions, addictions, limiting beliefs. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Let's see here. You know, so you're talking about like this withdrawal of from your body's messages, a withdrawal from others, like the ability to engage or the desire to engage with others in a meaningful way, being really present with others. Michele and Nick, did you have some things to add about the difference between healthy solitude and SOS and some warning signs?
Yes. So I think that solitude helps open us up to new and familiar realms, both within and outside of our own selves. It's not the same as engaging in habitual unconscious thoughts and judgments. So in solitude, we're present to our experience, whereas when we're lonely, we're invested in the idea of ourselves, usually indirectly through the idea of another person or other people. In isolation, in the way I spoke of it, a lack of connection has begun to take its toll on a person. So for warning signs from solitude to loneliness and isolation, I would say ask yourself whether you're thinking about your immediate wants and whether you feel content in your own presence. If you have negative thoughts or judgments about others, or to justify that you're happy that you're not with them, or you're unhappy if you are with them, you're probably uncomfortable and disconnected with yourself at that time. And that's okay too, because often enough, it's a process that you're going through. And so solitude doesn't have to be intentional to be beneficial. And I think that's an important aspect of the COVID situation, because it's bringing about the opportunity for the experience of solitude for people. So when it comes to something like being misunderstood or feeling misunderstood, we can ask, well, why is it that I feel misunderstood, and can that be okay? Can it be okay that I understand myself? Because there's a lot that we can actually gain from that and having that self-connection.
Interesting. I think a lot of the things that you were just mentioning are things that I've really noticed a lot in my own clients and circles as well, friends and family, just around this COVID being this opportunity to really explore the self and our solitude, and really kind of challenging some of the notions that we have about this like forced connection with others and really going in. Thanks,
Yeah,
Nick.
because I think there's a lot of context for understanding of connection with other people that maybe need to change. And maybe that's not our fault. Maybe that's not their fault. It's just that these aren't working for either of us anymore because we've changed. And so the bridge between us isn't there anymore necessarily.
Right.
So we need a new one, or we need a new understanding of ourself and acceptance of aspects of ourself that we haven't even looked at yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Michele, I noticed that you had unmuted yourself, ready to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm going to say is just, complimentary to what Nick and Sumeet have said. So I'm not going to say a whole lot, but for me, it kind of comes down to, like, I think in healthy solitude, there's an aliveness, and we feel like we know we're okay. When we start sliding into that unhealthy loneliness, there's a fundamental like inner feeling that we're not okay, that there's something missing, that there's an unmet need. And of course, when we experience an unmet need, like we all have a different set point as to how we feel. Like, do we feel like we're resourced to do something, to take action to meet it, or do we start going into hopelessness, helplessness? Oh, I don't have this connection and I can't do anything about it. That's where it starts to get really dangerous. Like, if we feel resourced, obviously reach out. Oh, I'm feeling lonely. What can I do? Reach out, talk to a friend. Do I feel like a sense of self-efficacy so I can move forward? Or can I even, again, look from a shamanic lens, go out and commune with the trees in my neighborhood, or the birds in my neighborhood. It's not always about the humans, although they're really important too. Yeah. So I'll think that's.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When I was preparing for this panel, I was shocked by some of the statistics around the implications for isolation and loneliness on our health, like the increased rate of dementia, heart disease, premature death, stroke. And it's not even small. Like, it's not like an increase of 10, 20%. We're talking 40 to 80% increased chance of loss of life, dementia. It's very serious. So if you see somebody slipping in to this unhealthy space, if you see yourself slipping into this unhealthy space, it's actually really, really important that that we start looking at some of the coping strategies. How do we first flag it in ourselves, and what are some coping strategies that we can do in ourselves? And then after that, I'll ask you another question, folks, around what we can do when we notice it in others. So for now, what would you guys say is key to coping strategies? If we're noticing these SOS signs, what are your top tips, guys, for addressing isolation and loneliness of the unhealthy variety in ourselves?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot you can do. Having healthy habits and hobbies. Because I'm kind of surprised to hear sometimes people say that they don't have any hobbies, right? And again, that's because there's a lot in our culture that's like a safety net we can fall back on, things that are easy to do, that offer only short-term, gratification. Reading, meditation, being in nature, going for walks, But just to be more specific, so like I said, so bringing the historical context when people were more alone, isolated, and when we were more like farmers or like lived in villages, there were a lot more. They were forced to be alone for most of their lives, and so that's where, like, for example, Emily Dickinson. Hello. Yeah, so that's where Emily Dickinson is. She's a poet, right? I think like late 1800s, where she spent a lot of her life alone, but in her room, locked up. But she wrote some of the most beautiful and profound poems of all time, right? And that's only because of her solitude, right? Because that alone time gave her time to actually develop and reflect on things and philosophize and introspect. And so creativity is a huge outlet. That's where you can, like Michelle was saying, you don't want to be dependent on others. Because I ask people, so what do you get from when you connect with, what are you ideally looking for when you want to connect with others? They say someone who listens, who's non-judgmental. I can feel like I can be like myself around them. And then I ask, how can you get those things from yourself so you're not dependent on others? And creativity is actually a huge way, because, so for example, when I feel alone, that's when I actually start writing a lot, because it's hard there's a lot that I'm fantasizing about, things I can't change about in the world. So what I do is I create characters who are powerful, and they do change the world. They're heroes, and it's almost like I'm living through them. And it's such a satisfying feeling, because it's like I'm creating my own world, and it feels like godlike, or I'm able, like, or for a painter, if they have anger in them, they paint their anger, right? And so what that does is transmutes tension and anxiety and emotion into something beautiful. So you're taking something that's considered negative, right? I guess, or something that's very tense. Like, the big part of creativity is tension. So you take this tension existing in you, and what you've done, instead of just letting it simmer or distracting yourself from it, numbing it, you've now transformed it into something that's beautiful and profound, and that can help others with healing. You know, yeah. So in therapy, that's called like sublimation, right? You've taken something and transmuted it into something else. And lastly, I would say, so that's creativity, but then there's also the spiritual, where last year was the most devastating year of my life, where I lost everything. And, so I was finally forced to kind of turn to God, because I didn't have anything left. And then I couldn't believe it. Because I finally started talking to God. I started to pray. And what I noticed is that if I really had someone there, it was, you don't even have to believe in God. It was almost like this metaphor of your higher self, the best parts of yourself. So it's almost like you're struggling, you don't know what to do. I'm uncertain, I don't know if I'm going to find work. And then you start talking to this higher power, and that higher power could just be you in the future or whatever, right? Where you're connecting to this part of you that's like, hey, you're going to be okay, have faith. The Lord's Prayer has been huge for me, like saying those words every day and really feeling their impact. It makes me a better person, right? To not say them in this hollow way, but to actually feel the words and their impact. So praying has been huge. Yeah, because that's, in history, that's what we had to do, right? Through difficult times, like God was that light in the darkness. So that what I would recommend is just find something that helps you connect to the sacred. It could be music, like the Gregorian chants. Like when you hear something like that, it's hard to feel alone, because it feels connected to something greater than yourself, the universe. Sacred plant medicine, meditation, yoga. Find something that helps you connect with something greater than yourself, that generates this sense of wonder and beauty, curiosity and awe. And you're just like, wow. For example, like mystics, they go out into like forests and mountains and deserts, and they do fasting and meditation, and they're able to reach these higher levels of consciousness that makes them feel a oneness with the whole universe. And how can you feel alone when you feel connected to anything through these kind of spiritual practices? And it is possible. I've been there, where you lose this sense of self, your body, of time and space, and you just feel like you're connected to everything, like Michelle was saying. So yeah, in short, creativity, God, connecting with something higher than yourself, hobbies, meditation, knowledge, learning. So those are all powerful ways.
I just have to make a plea for pets are a good strategy for feeling less lonely.
Anything else, Michelle?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I really didn't mean to, just jump in, but Zeus kind of gave me the cue, right?
Well, pets are like
They are.
I in my own reading, they are another really great strategy. The animal kingdom is our furry friends or our scaly friends. They're a great strategy.
Yeah, and I think I want to sort of jump in. I have a little bit of a different lens compared to Sumeet, but that the spiritual truth that we are all connected, and to something larger, but that is like the intelligence that lives in all things. So, the intelligence that lives in the plants and the animals, in the land, in us. If we can, he's really being very very expressive. Remind ourselves that of the truth of that. And so going out in nature is a good way to help us connect to that truth in an embodied way, to feel our feet on the land, to feel the sun on our skin, even to feel the cold against our skin, to remember that we are of these places where we are. And the pandemic, oddly, for me, I remember in the early weeks, the first layer was, feeling isolated, but then realizing like I became more dependent on, telecommunications, and really grateful for running water and electricity. I went, oh yeah, like there are people that I don't see, but that are making this happen. And, we started hearing about essential workers. I went, yeah, right. Like the people that stock the shelves in our grocery stores, and the cashiers, and the truck drivers who get the food there. We are all really interdependent. I had not been thinking about those people on a regular basis before, but I think the slowdown and all the activity really kind of brought it into stark relief. I went, right. It was always true that we were interdependent on each other. So even just the reminder of the frame of how are we looking at the world. We have a culture that has tended to value independence, rugged individualism. The New Age movement is frankly done us all a disservice, and a lot of the individualistic thinking about like I create my own reality, I'm responsible for my own success. There's kernels of truth in that, but it misses that interdependence piece. And so even just the way we frame our understanding, what beliefs we choose to have about our connectedness or disconnectedness, we can influence that. And then the last thing I will say is we can be an agent of that interconnectedness. So we can combat our own loneliness and isolation by reaching out to other people. And like all the research shows that people who volunteer, people who contribute to others, their community, are happier than those who don't. And, everybody has their own unique gifts and talents. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And it may be formal volunteer work, it may be informal. But we feel better when we offer service to others.
Okay, so I think I'll share here. I think one thing that's happening right now, we're all facing a situation that is similar to the lives of people who were isolated and lonely before the pandemic. And certain environmental factors give a person the opportunity for going in one or two directions when they're not connected to themselves. Well, there's many directions, but I think of the side of anxiety on one hand, and then the side of loneliness and isolation on the other. They are related, but there's a difference in that when we have the opportunity to break down, whether that's forced upon us through anxiety that we've tried to keep under the rug the entire time, when it forces itself to the surface, there's also the possibility of us becoming isolated in the sense of shutting down from that, of not even having the opportunity to break down. So I think the ability to break down is really important. We have in our culture a lot of limited frames of looking at our own emotions and our own interactions with people. So I just on a personal level, I recall a few times just looking in the mirror and just witnessing a little more subtlety in my facial expression than I had noticed before, because going about my everyday business, I have a little bit of a mask on. But on a human level, right, so much of our brains are interrelated to our facial expressions. So there are things that we don't notice when we're in a certain mindset, but when we have the opportunity to look at ourselves, I might see a person in a mirror and go, oh, that person's a little sad. So I'm going to have a conversation with that person because they're showing up. So giving ourselves space to have that is important. Now with others, it's a similar process, but we do need to be sensitive to ourselves enough that if we saw that we have a mask on, that we have that same skill set for approaching another person, and knowing that sometimes the mask wants to cover things up, but providing the space and the opportunity for a person to actually experience the breakdown, even if it's small, even if it's just a little sigh or like, oh well, yeah, I am alone and I am lonely. But the just to reiterate some of the things that Sumeet was saying, the importance of nature and of having hobbies, of having structure in our lives is immense, right? Right, with COVID, a lot of the external structures that people relied on, like in their ordinary work life, are being more simplified and kind of brought to their like bare bones form. And so this is a good opportunity to make real structure for yourself in life, so you can get to know yourself better and spend time in nature, reflect on your experiences with journaling, and have a conversation with yourself, right? If you don't have space to break down, well, give yourself the space, have a conversation with yourself. And, nature can be a wonderful teacher in having that conversation, because you have a different context to have that conversation with yourself. I read an article by a woman whose mother was suffering from Alzheimer's. And she was read on some of the neuroscience, and she was herself really, really contemplative and introspective. So what she did was she took her mom on walks through areas of nature, and she found that she had access to memory in a completely different way than she would have if she were shut in. So having the experience of nature, she would be present, she would be fully present and conscious to the experience of seeing a tree and seeing how something had changed, while she couldn't necessarily remember her name or what her favorite meals were or whatever. So taking ourselves out of the mindset and structure that society has imposed upon us and creating more for ourselves, and recognizing that nature is a fundamental component of who we really are, that really shines through and shows the mask that society puts on our faces and prevents us from having that opportunity to break down or to break through and feel connected and loved.
Thank you so much. Wow, you guys have such a wealth of knowledge and resource to share. Before we move into our last question, I just wanted to acknowledge that Michele does need to depart a little bit early. So I will invite Michele to answer first our next question. Really, it's around supporting the people around us. So you've given us some amazing strategies for supporting ourselves. If we're noticing somebody else is slipping into this, perhaps unhealthy sense of isolation and loneliness, Can you share some strategies and techniques that we can do to support our loved ones in this process? And I'll continue to take notes in our chat box here, just to summarize some of the key points that you guys talk about as you raise it, just in case there's other note takers out there that are trying to track the conversation. Michele, do you have something to share, some tips and advice?
Go. Okay. Yeah, and it picks up on some of the things we've already alluded to. I think if we can show up for those we care about with authenticity, so that means we show up without preconceived ideas, with open mind, open heart, able to be with them even if they're in discomfort. See if we can get past some of our habitual ways. Like I said with my client, they had these regular communications through the day, but they were just like going through the motions. There was this lack of realness. So we need to be real. And that means sometimes, I think we feel better and we feel less alone. It's amazing to me because I've set up peer support programs for people with neurotrauma. And sometimes I've had people say, oh God, that must be depressing. And it's really not. It's there's just a level of relaxation when they know they can be with somebody who gets the problems, the struggles, and really gets it and doesn't try to whitewash it or doesn't try to just gloss it over. We all feel much better if somebody will not jump into the abyss with us, but just, I find myself saying to clients sometimes, yeah, that's really hard. What you're going through really sucks right now. Yeah, we don't have to make it okay. We just have to say, yeah, I see you. I hear you. And I'm not going to run away. Yeah. And even that just allows a relaxation. And I think we can do, there might be some more sort of tangible, practical things we can do. Again, depending on what we know about the person, we can offer some kind of service, invite somebody to join us for a walk or, take over, drop off some food, just give a call, just so sorry, this cat is just having a great time this morning. Let people know that we're thinking about them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. One of the things that you mentioned was like to not drop into the abyss with us. Like I think it's an interesting thing how to stay grounded and present in your own self and still very present and authentic with whatever somebody is going through. Yeah. And I'm not sure that that's like a skill that a lot of people necessarily have. They kind of like, in order to demonstrate their empathy, they get upset with you and they get like sad with you. And the strategies and techniques for like active listening and like mindful communication and being present and witness and grounded while also being authentic. I think that's a really interesting dance,
Yeah, that's probably a whole other panel, actually.
That's a whole other panel. So Michele, I know you have to head out.
Yeah,
I just want to thank you.
Yeah, thank
very
you
much
for being here. Yeah, nice to see you. Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sumeet and Nick, would either of you like to get started on this and offer some strategies for how we can support others if we're noticing they're going down the unhealthy rabbit hole of isolation and loneliness, or how to nurture some of the positive aspects of solitude that you're talking about, and those healthy components, like how to balance it for the people that we love.
Yeah, well, Michele gave a great answer about this kind of being there and open. So what I can add to that is just like absolute listening, right? Because absolute listening is when we just listen, right? Pure intention of just listening. So that means no facial expressions, no body language, just because even with those, we're communicating certain things. Like if someone says something and we start nodding, or yeah, and then the person's like, why would you nod to that thing that I just said? Now they're kind of distracted. It's like, that's not a good thing that I just mentioned, right? And so, or like if we have certain kinds of, we might not be aware of what we're doing. So just kind of sit still and listen and really receive the words, not trying to fix, not trying to blame, not trying to solve. And that alone is really good for people. And what can help with that is, grounding exercises, you know, um, maybe both you can do some deep breathing, do like a social ritual, so before you get started, you just take some deep breaths and just kind of invite this, like a sacred energy into this, like this time that we're spending together sacred. I know this hard, we're both struggling with a lot, and to just invite that extra protection, right? Because we're only human. That's why I keep invoking God and spirituality, because again, we're only human and we need help to get through these things, these challenges of being human. So social rituals, grounding exercises, you can do like a hand. So those are things I did in class, right? When I got my education and training. So absolute listening, and then also putting your hands up. So and eye gazing. So looking directly at someone's eyes to maintain focus, and that helps with developing that intimacy that people are struggling with, right? Because like, hey, I see you, I'm here for you. I'm not going to get distracted by looking at other things, and also the eyes are very powerful because it's like you're gazing into a person's soul, right? So there's that, and then also um, putting your hands on another person's hands while they're speaking. So, um, I, so like your hands are kind of, they meet in the middle, right? Kind of on top of each other's knees, palms on each other's palms. And so what this helps with, because I did this in class, so we noticed what it was like to just listen in silence. It was okay. There were some challenges, and then we noticed what it was like to listen with our hands on top of each other's hands, and it was way different. The sharing was so much more intimate and emotional, and there's so much less ego involved, because when you have that physical tethering, there's also this emotional tethering, and I get that's a challenge now with social distancing in it, but I'm obviously talking about if that wasn't, you know um yeah. So those are some ways to support people, and also just let people know you're there, but don't impose, because you can only help someone if they're willing to receive the help, right? So let them know if they're there, if they do say that they want support, and then just listen, and then you can offer resources if you have them, if the person is inclined for them. um but yeah, those kind of things help. You can ask for support. You can play classical music. There's a lot of studies on it. It's the best form of music in terms of health benefits. You can do that while you're alone. You can do that while you're with someone, because then that promotes a calming presence. You can use aromatherapy and things like that.
Right.
Authentic relating.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Those are some really great tips and tools for sure. Nick, I'm just aware of the time, but I would love to hear some of the strategies and advice that you have to offer if we notice others that we love in
Sure.
need of support.
Yeah. So much of the process of solitude and self-awareness is actually unconscious. I spoke about the experiences in nature earlier. So sometimes we don't even know what a tree or fresh air gives us beyond our own immediate perception of the experience. And often the experience of loneliness is not something that in the immediate moment, we don't know what's going on either. And so we might not be pleased with what's going on. But being in nature and being in solitude in those valuable moments when we're going through changes and transformations on a subconscious level, those things can affect us for days, weeks, and sometimes even years later, because we had certain feelings and aha moments during those times. So like with what Michele was saying about not having to jump into the abyss with a person, we don't need to meet a person exactly with what they think they're going through at the moment. And there's even times when they don't even need to know that we're there for them. But we do have those key moments when we can tune in and make them aware that we're present with them and that we're present for them. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to, drive home like, hey, I'm here for you. You're going through something. I'm supporting you. Sometimes we just need to be aware of them, and also be aware that we don't know everything that's going on. So much of it is subconscious. All we need to do is really be aware at, at different stages. A person is going through changes, which are grander than their conscious mind or our conscious mind is really available to at that moment. So just like the way a tree supports a person, it's not always on that level of offering conscious support to the conscious personality. Just having love for a person is huge, and I think that's one of the main things that's actually missing in cases of isolation. It's not always that a person doesn't have, right, the reciprocity of feeling with other people. It's that the connection to the actual love isn't there, and the actual love is something that isn't necessarily conscious. Just like how, being in the presence of a tree affects you in ways that aren't necessarily conscious for you, but benefit you tremendously.
Yeah, I think the power of that just conscious support, whether they know it or not, is really impactful. I've been following some of the work of the Noetic Institute and stuff, and they do a lot of studies around the impact of intention and compassion, whether the other person knows it or not, and it has physical results. Like it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really interesting point. Like there's letting people know that you're there for them, and then there's just being aware of them, and having love for them, and that sense of awareness and consciousness for them while they're going through that. It also has an impact. Mm-hmm. And I like your example too of the tree. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, trees are beautiful.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. So I just want to thank everybody, absolutely, for being present today, for this conversation. I really hope that some of these tools and strategies will help you personally, and also help you in supporting the people that you love. At least to spark some conversation in your own circles with the people that you care for. Touch in with them. I'd like to invite Sumeet and Nick, if you could please put your contact information in the chat box, so people can reach out to you directly if they need to, if they feel so called. And Michele is breathsong.com or .ca. And all of their bios and stuff you can see on our website as well at innerartscollective.com. And I do invite you to check out the website, innerartscollective.com. On the homepage, we have an invitation to participate in ongoing discussion and dialogue on the Inner Arts Hive. So I'll be posting this video there, and some follow-up resources as well. So I thank you so much. Being present for these conversations is really, it doesn't just help us, it ripples out and it affects future generations as well. So thank you for being present for yourselves and for the people around you that you care for and that you love. It is a difficult time, so it's hard, but we are very resourceful people, and I hope you can access the support and the resources within yourselves and in your community, and to help you move forward. So I'd like to invite Sumeet and Nick, if you have any closing words of inspiration, and all of our guests today, actually, if you have some closing words of inspiration for folks, to invite you to do that now.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining. It's very important that we all come together and have these conversations, to move our culture forward in a more positive and wholesome direction. There's a quotation that I love, and it's that solitude is a school of genius, right? When you I give the example of Emily Dickinson, but there's also Isaac Newton, there's Nikola Tesla, you know, and solitude, these people wouldn't have become geniuses if it wasn't for solitude, because it's only because they had so much passion and love for this craft, for this hobby, whatever you want to call it, that they were able to, you know, really contribute something incredible to, you know, humans. And so in short, just find something you love and really devote yourself to, have a relationship with it, you know, explore it, all the different layers of it, you know, like I'm doing with comedy, right? It's almost like being with others, like a step down now, because like it deprives me from being with comedy, right? So it's almost like I cheating on comedy if I'm being with others. So, you know.
Okay. So just to reiterate, thank you everyone for being with us today. It was wonderful to connect. And I just wanted to say that if you're lonely, there's something in you that wants to share a part of itself. And so maybe that part is just a little shy, maybe just a little angry or sad. And all that's muffling their voice to you. So make space for them. Give them a chance to open up to you. And if you need some help in doing this, give me a call. You can book a consultation with me and we'll go from there.
Thank you, everybody. Many blessings in your journey. I really do wish you well. And thank you so much, Sumeet, Nick, and Michelle, for joining us today.